We're in Practical Math Applications, Chapter 4. This is part C and D. And on these parts, we're working on reconciling your checking account with the bank statement. And then part D is doing a bunch of the same things that we've already done, just doing it in a word problem. So let's take a look at reconciling a bank statement to start with. When we're reconciling a bank statement, we'll have a bank balance and you'll have your checkbook balance. They will more than likely not be exactly the same. Whatever your bank balance is will likely be missing some checks that you've written, because usually they'll send it, especially if you get it through the mail, they'll send it through the mail and it takes time for it to go through the mail, and all the while that it's going through the mail, you're writing checks and making deposits and just conducting your business the way that you normally do. So the bank balance will not have all the checks that you've written. Even when you do it online, your bank balance may still be missing some checks that have been written because maybe the company hasn't batched out, which means that they haven't claimed any debit cards that you've used, or maybe you've written a check that somebody hasn't turned in yet, hasn't gotten the money for yet. But either way, there will probably be some outstanding checks. Once those checks go through, that will change the balance. So what we're trying to get to is the most accurate account balance. If the bank balance is an amount and you know you have outstanding checks, the first thing that you'll have to do is subtract outstanding checks from your bank balance. Now, just like you have outstanding checks that haven't gone through, it's likely that you've also made deposits that you made after the bank balance came through. So you may have outstanding deposits out there. Outstanding deposits would be added to the bank balance. Okay. At the same time, the bank also has transactions and things that are happening within the bank that you may not be aware of. For instance, you may have a fee for using a checking account. If you have a fee, the bank balance will have that subtracted already, but you may not have it subtracted on your checkbook. So you'll have to subtract any fees that you have from the bank on your checkbook. In addition to that, the bank balance may have interest that you've gained on your checking account that you weren't aware of, or weren't aware of the amount. So any interest you've gained, you'll have to add to your checkbook balance. After you've done those things, you should have the same amount. If it's different, then the best way to calculate is to calculate the difference, and whatever amount comes up there, you'll look for errors in your checking account first, because those errors you can change on your own. So you'll go back through, check all your balances. If you find errors could be either added or subtracted, of course, depending on the type of error that it is. If you accidentally took too much money away when you were recording a check, then you would have to add that balance back as an error. If you accidentally didn't take enough, then you would have to subtract the difference from your checkbook balance. Then, after you've checked those errors, if they are still not the same, any difference, you should check the bank's uh, transactions. And there, if you find an error, you'll have to contact the bank and see if you can have them run a trace or whatever they have to do an audit to make sure that they can make any corrections that need to be made on your account. Okay, so with that whole process in place, let's go ahead and look at C. It says, identify the effect of the following items to either the bank statement or the check register balance. To indicate the correct action, select the appropriate letter from the following. If we have a service charge are the same as fees. So if we have a service charge, we're going to subtract those from our checkbook balance. Subtract those from our checkbook balance is D. So the answer to number 32 is D. If we gained interest on our checking account, then we would, here's our checkbook, we would add any interest that's gained. So that means we would add it to our checkbook balance. And that is C, add to checkbook balance. Outstanding deposits. Outstanding deposits would be subtracted from our bank balance, and that is outstanding deposits would be added. I said that wrong. Would be added to our bank balance. So outstanding deposits is A, add to the bank balance. Checks that were returned insufficient funds. We didn't really talk about this, but if you had a check that was returned as insufficient funds, that means that you thought maybe it was outstanding, but they actually declined it and returned it back, which means that check is not going to be subtracted from the balance after all. So you'll need to add that portion back to your checkbook amount because they're not going to subtract it. It didn't go through. You didn't have enough funds. So you would add back to the checkbook balance, which is C. Outstanding checks are subtracted from the bank balance. So that's B, subtracted from the bank balance. Errors in checking are D, subtracted from the checkbook balance. But we know that they could also be added to the checkbook balance depending on what kind of error it was, because errors could go either way, added or subtracted. Okay, that gets you through part C. Part D is just working through the problems that we've already done. So you should be able to read each of the problems and just fill them in with the information that's given in this part. So go ahead and work through those problems. If you have any questions as you work through them or any problems getting those finished, be sure to let me know and I'll be glad to go over any of those.